The Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is not afraid of threats from United States President Donald Trump and intends to continue the war against Ukraine until the West agrees to his terms. Moreover, the territorial demands of the dictator may increase as Russian troops advance in Ukraine. This was reported today, citing 3 sources close to the Kremlin. And essentially, this means that the Kremlin has decided to voice its response and position regarding Donald Trump's ultimatum, in which he gave Russia 50 days to reach a peace agreement. Meanwhile, the United States is preparing a large military aid package for Ukraine worth $10 billion, which will include new air defense systems, long-range missiles, and artillery ammunition. But that's not all. At the same time, Western analysts are already saying that Putin will really test Trump's resolve. And the main mistake of the United States president is said to be the fact that he still hasn't dared to impose secondary sanctions against Russia's closest partners, who are already promising to increase their support for the Kremlin in the war against Ukraine. I am Alexei Pechi. It's July 15th. That was the introduction. Now let's review everything in detail. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment you want, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in this video's description. So, today the publication basically voiced the Kremlin's position in response to yesterday's ultimatum from Donald Trump. As the agency writes, Russian leader Vladimir Putin is not afraid of threats from United States President Donald Trump and intends to continue the war in Ukraine until the West agrees to his terms. Moreover, the dictator's territorial demands may increase as Russian troops advance in Ukraine. And here is what officials close to the Kremlin are saying. According to Putin, Russia, having endured tough Western sanctions, can withstand further economic difficulties, including tariffs aimed at buyers of Russian oil. According to the source, despite several phone conversations with Trump and several meetings with the United States Special Representative Steve Witkoff, the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin believes that no one has seriously discussed the details of a peace agreement on Ukraine with him. He was left feeling offended that everyone talked to him, but no one listened to his demands. Sources also said that Putin's conditions for peace are NATO's commitment not to expand eastward, Ukraine's neutrality, limiting the size of the Ukrainian army, protection of Russian-speaking people living in Ukraine, and recognition of Russia's territorial gains. Putin is also reportedly ready to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine with the participation of major powers, although, according to sources, it's unclear how any of this would actually work. And Putin insists that the Russian Federation, which brazenly, shamelessly, and without any reason attacked Ukraine, should be one of the guarantors of Ukraine's security. Another source said that the dictator believes Russia's goals in the war against Ukraine are significantly more important than any potential economic losses from Western pressure. That's why he's reportedly unconcerned about United States tariff threats against China and India. 2 other sources also gave additional arguments that encourage Russia to continue the war. These are its achievements on the battlefield and the production of key munitions, which supposedly surpasses the production of NATO countries. One of the sources also suggested that Putin might want to occupy even more territories. As the saying goes, appetite increases with eating. But we've already heard this before. These are just more threats that if you don't surrender now on our terms, then we'll capture 3 more regions. Basically, this was already voiced by the so-called negotiators from Russia back in May during the talks in Istanbul. And 2 other sources, the publication writes, confirm this independently of each other. Russia will act based on Ukraine's weakness, noted the 3rd source. According to him, Moscow may stop its offensive after capturing 4 regions of Ukraine if it faces strong resistance. But if not, it will also capture the Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy and Kharkiv regions. And as I mentioned earlier, on the eve of this, Trump made an important statement about imposing tariffs against Russia and supplying weapons to Ukraine. He specifically announced that he would impose secondary tariffs against Russia and its partners and allies if there is no agreement on a peaceful settlement in Ukraine within 50 days. The American leader also spoke about the supply of American weapons to Ukraine. He said that the United States and the European Union have reached an agreement under which the costs will fall on Europe. And as Trump said, quote, "We will produce it and they will pay for it." Our last meeting, which took place a month ago, was very successful, in the sense that they agreed to 5% of gross domestic product for defense within NATO, which amounts to more than $1 trillion a year. So they have a lot of money. These are wealthy countries. Here Trump is hinting that overall NATO is ready to spend huge amounts of money on their own defense. The United States president also expressed disappointment with the Russian dictator. He stated that he was counting on the head of the Kremlin to agree to a ceasefire, but that never happened. And at the same time, Segodnya writes that United States President Donald Trump has sharply changed his rhetoric towards Russia. He had at least 3 strong reasons for this. First, Trump believes that Putin is showing him personal disrespect by pretending to be ready for peace, but ignoring Trump's call for a ceasefire. Second, Trump sees the effectiveness of United States military power in the use of B-2 bombers and Tomahawk missiles against Iran. Therefore, he understands that if Ukraine is given the same kind of weapons, well, B-2s are unlikely, of course, but at least some long-range missiles, and these missiles are launched at Moscow, it could have an effect. And third, Trump believes that Putin will only negotiate under the threat of greater force. And further, I'll quote the Washington Post, Trump decided to escalate in order to de-escalate. Trump made the right choice by recognizing that Putin won't make concessions without increased pressure. But the United States president also chose a course of escalation, the risks of which are unknown. Interestingly, the only question Trump didn't want to answer during the Oval Office briefing on Monday was this: if Putin decides to escalate further, how far are you willing to go? Response? Don't ask me that question, how far? Trump replied sharply. I just want to resolve the war. But if Trump can make this new pressure campaign work, he might finally earn the famous Nobel Prize. At the same time, it's important to remember that the new bold statement by United States President Donald Trump regarding Russia was far from the biggest one he could have made. Therefore, Ukraine has reasons both for hope and, unfortunately, for disappointment. The good news for Ukraine is that the American president allowed other NATO members to buy American weapons for Ukraine. The fact is that Patriot systems can shoot down the missiles that Russia uses to attack Ukrainian cities. And only the White House, only Trump can authorize their delivery. And Ukraine was lacking exactly these and other American weapons, which were not specified but may be included in future deliveries. But the main problem for Ukraine is that Trump did not announce secondary sanctions against countries that buy Russian oil. And this, as you understand, could seriously truly hit the military budget of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin at last. And then there's also the adoption of a bill on draconian sanctions against Russia. The authorship of Senators Graham and Blumenthal was postponed. Although if it had been adopted, its effect would really have been devastating for the Russian economy, and therefore for the Russian military machine as well. At the same time, Trump didn't just give Putin 50 days for nothing to agree to a ceasefire. This creates a window in which India and China, first and foremost, can try to stop buying Russian energy resources, although to be honest, that's unlikely. Although it's not the first time Trump has set deadlines for Putin, it's probably the first time he's done it in this tone. But it's still not enough, and that's the problem. Trump's policy toward Ukraine may be transforming under the influence of current sentiment, but it retains key elements from the past. The desire for someone else to pay the bills instead of the United States setting certain deadlines instead of taking immediate action, and the belief that the Kremlin is seeking peace. Trump continues to believe that it is possible to make a deal with Putin. For this, he gives him a deadline, and Putin actively takes advantage of this. The Kremlin is now essentially disrespecting Trump, stating that his ultimatums and deadlines do not intimidate them. We don't understand at all. First it was 24 hours, then 2 weeks, now 50 days. What's next? 100 days? What will happen after that? Trump, unfortunately, is not taking immediate action, but is trying, with threats, by pushing with these threats, to somehow force his position. Unfortunately, it's not working, and Putin is actively exploiting this situation, even threatening Trump. So I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Subtitles created by